Hello, welcome to BEH 221, Resolution-Based Counseling Skills. Today we're going to be discussing attending, empathy, and observation skills. So before we get into what attending actually means, we need to go backwards a little and talk about listening. Listening is the core of developing a relationship and making real contact with our clients. One of the best ways to identify and define listening skills is to experience the opposite, in other words, poor listening. So think of a time when someone failed to listen to you, perhaps a family member or friend who failed to hear your concerns, a teacher or employer who misunderstood your actions and treated you unfairly, or you had that all too familiar experience of calling a computer helpline and never getting anyone who could comprehend your issues. Think about the frustration, hurt, or even anger when you were not heard or understood. And there's a little quote over here on the right that I think really captures what listening poorly means, as most people do not listen with the intent to understand, they listen with the intent to reply. So, we have become literally a nation of lawyers who are waiting to jump in and argue our point no matter what the context of the conversation is. So let's get to attending, and attending is key to building a working relationship or therapeutic alliance with your clients. All theories and methods of interviewing, counseling, and psychotherapy rest on the base of attending behavior. Attending means being with someone else and giving that person your full attention to what they are saying or doing. In a one-on-one counseling relationship, this is the supportive service that a counselor must provide. Failure to do this will mean the client is not being fully supported and may not feel able to disclose or make progress. Attending also means a counselor must pay attention to everything a client says and does. This includes reading the client's body language and also paying attention to the silences and pauses that take place in a conversation. Actively listening not only conveys information, but also encourages the client to continue talking. Attending behavior is not just for interviewing and counseling. It is fundamental to interpersonal communication in all cultures, although the style of listening will often vary. There are 4 key dimensions when we think of attending behavior. Attending behavior, again, defined as supporting your client with individually and culturally appropriate verbal following, visuals, vocal quality, and body language, otherwise known as the 3 V's and a B. So, visual and eye contact. In the United States especially, eye contact is important to build trust. So you should look at people when you speak to them and vice versa. Vocal quality. Communicate warmth and interest with your voice. Think of how many ways you can say, I am really interested in what you have to say, just by altering your vocal tone and speech rate. And anytime you've ever had a fight with your partner or love muffin, it's oftentimes because of the tone of voice or the quality of your vocal intonations. It's not what you say, it's how you say it that oftentimes will get somebody annoyed at you. Number 3, verbal tracking. You have to stay with the client's story no matter how much it meanders, and don't change the subject. A lot of clients bury what they're most concerned about in a morass of some long story that doesn't really seem to make a lot of sense. But you have to not just stay with the story, you have to find ways to clarify what the client is talking about. And finally, body language. To show interest, face the client squarely, lean slightly forward with an expressive face, and use encouraging gestures. Smiling shows warmth and interest in the client. And, For example, in your communications class, you're going to learn various ways of engaging with people in terms of, nodding your head, making that eye contact, not fidgeting, things that will distract somebody from what they're trying to say. Each of the three V's in B needs to be modified to meet individual and multicultural differences. When you use each of the microskills, you can anticipate how the client may respond. These predictions are not 100% accurate, but research has shown what you can usually expect. If your first attempt at listening is not received well, you can intentionally act and show your interest and involvement by going back to something the client said earlier, which indicates that not only are you listening, that you're making connections the client may not have initially thought of. Your interview style changes the brain for good or for bad. You are actually rewiring the brain and facilitating rewriting of old, ineffective memories to new and more useful ones. Neuroscience and research has shown that when people are repeating a story, it is going to change within their memory banks just a tiny little bit. And every time you repeat a story, your memory of it is adjusted just a little bit. So part of the work of a therapist or a counselor is to try and have the person tell the story and reshape it into more of a strength or a positive. The three V's and a B reduce interviewer talk time and provide clients with an opportunity to tell their stories as much as detail as needed. You will find it helpful to observe your client's verbal and nonverbal behavior. Each person you work with will have a unique style of communicating. And most importantly, listen before you leap. A frequent tendency of a new counselor or interviewer is to try to solve the client's difficulties in the first 5 minutes. It's critical that you slow down, relax, and attend to client narratives. Remember, trust is built over time. It doesn't just happen day one. Cultural differences in eye contact are numerous, but we must recall that individual differences are often even greater and avoid stereotyping any client or group with so-called normative patterns. Direct eye contact is considered a sign of interest in European and North American middle-class culture, with more eye contact while listening and less while talking. However, research indicates that some African Americans in the United States may have reverse patterns, looking more when talking and slightly less when listening. Among some traditional Native American and Latin groups, eye contact by the young is a sign of disrespect. You want to look at clients and notice quick shifts and breaks in eye contact. Clients often tend to look away when thinking about a complex issue or discussing a distressing topic. So that just paying attention to the eye contact can help you discern what's going on underneath the surface with a client. Your voice is an instrument that communicates much of the feeling you have toward another person or situation. Changes in its pitch, volume, or speech rate often convey the emotions underlying your words. If you think about the way you tell a story, you will likely find yourself giving increased vocal emphasis to certain words and phrases. This is known as verbal underlining. Clients do the same thing. The key words that a person underlines by means of volume and emphasis are often ideas of a particular importance. So, just as an example, think about it when you were younger and you got in trouble and your mother would yell your name, including your middle name. And that middle name seemed to just stand out louder than any of the other parts of that sentence. And you know she's mad. So, a lot of times this Fluidity in conversational style is interrupted with this verbal underlining for a specific reason. Speech awareness of your voice and observation of the changes in others' vocal qualities will enhance your attending skills. Speech hesitations, breaks, and the timing of vocal changes can signal distress, anxiety, or discomfort. Clearing one's throat may indicate that the words are not coming easily. It could also mean that the person's a little sick and has some congestion. So again, context becomes a much more important commodity when you are assessing what is going on with the client. Verbal tracking means staying with your client's topic to encourage full elaboration of the narrative. Just as people make sudden shifts in nonverbal communication, they change topics when they aren't comfortable. In middle-class U.S. communication, direct tracking is important, but in some Asian cultures, such direct verbal follow-up may be considered rude and intrusive. Verbal tracking is especially helpful to both the beginning and the experienced interviewer who is lost or puzzled about what to say next in response to a client. Observe yourself and use selective attention. One way to respond is to reflect on the main theme of the client's story. For example, you must feel like you're being hit from all directions. Which would you like to talk about first? Different interviewers place emphasis on different issues. Some interviewers consistently listen attentively to only a few key topics while ignoring other possibilities. Be alert to your own potential patterning of responses. It is important to see that no issue gets lost, but equally important to avoid confusion by not trying to solve everything at once. This cartoon on the right is one of my favorite things about selective attention. The wife says, "You only hear the things you want to hear." And he says, "A beer? Sounds lovely, thank you." So in that selective attention, you have to be vigilant and make sure you are listening so that you can track the conversation. Just as cultural differences in eye contact exist, body language patterns also differ. A comfortable conversational distance for many North Americans is slightly more than an arm's length, so about 18 to 24 inches. The British prefer even greater distances, whereas many Latin people prefer half that distance, and some people from the Middle East may talk standing only inches apart. So, personal space, or proxemics, is a concept that changes from culture to culture. And, depending on whom you are working with, you will often see them feeling their personal space either being violated or them violating your personal space because of their traditions. So you have to be aware that this is part of that body language interpretation zone. What determines a comfortable interpersonal distance is influenced by multiple factors, including gender. Women tend to feel more comfortable with distance than men. Personality. Introverts need more distance than extroverts. Age. Children and the young tend to adopt closer distances. So a child who's talking to you, they may be close enough that you can see how many teeth they have, but they don't have that cultural socialization that tells them what's appropriate yet. The topic of conversation. Difficult topics such as sexual worries or personal misbehavior may lead a person to more distance. They want to distance themselves from what they're talking about, and they also want to distance themselves from any potential judgments you may be making. And finally, personal relationships. Harmonious friends or couples tend to be closer. When disagreements occur, observe how harmony disappears. This is also a client. When you find a client suddenly This happens with clients when you find a client suddenly crossing their arms, looking away, or fidgeting. Being attentive, giving your attention to the client, means surrendering yourself in the other. It means that the client is the key person in your conscious field of awareness. The famed psychologist William James said, "Attention is the behavioral and cognitive process of selectively concentrating on one aspect of the environment while ignoring all other things." So, what is this meaning of consciousness? A new definition proposed by Michael Graziano in 2013 is simple and straightforward. Consciousness is a perceptual process. What we see, hear, feel, taste, touch, think, and feel in the here and now moment. What we perceive, even in our mind's eye as we think internally, is the closest we ever get to a conscious experience. Consciousness is all that we tell ourselves about when we see and perceive. It is our stories. So consciousness is really this idea of what are we experiencing at this very moment with our perceptions. Neuroscience notes that consciousness involves the brain's attentional system of orienting, executive control, and resting state areas of the brain. What does this mean for you as a counselor, a therapist, or a coach? Well, first, drawing out client stories and facilitating the rewriting of ineffective stories are basic to the nature of helping. A key route to becoming conscious of clients is empathetic understanding. High proficiency in attending behavior is required if you are to be truly conscious of your clients. Beginning and advanced professionals will always need to increase and practice their attending, attention, and understanding of others. And empathy, there's a couple examples in these cartoons. The first one is a guy with an arrow shot in his butt talking to the other guy who has an arrow shot in his butt, and he says, "I know exactly how you feel." And then below that is an older woman talking to her cat who has brought her the gift of a mouse. And the lady says, "How would you feel if the mouse did that to you?" And of course, this idea of being able to put yourself in somebody else's shoes is absolutely vital to any helping profession. Putting yourself into another person's shoes or viewing the world through someone else's eyes and ears is another way to describe empathy. It was Carl Rogers who brought the importance of empathy to our attention. It is vital to listen carefully, enter the world of the client, and communicate that we understand the client's world as the client sees and experiences it. And here's a couple quotes that really kind of define empathy in a broader context. Empathy is seeing with the eyes of another, listening with the ears of another, and feeling with the heart of another. And then on the other side, empathy is about finding echoes of another person in yourself. So empathy is really that idea of walk a mile in someone else's shoes. There are 3 types of empathetic understanding. Number 1, subtractive empathy. Interviewer responses give back to the client less than what the client stated or distorts what has been said. The listening or influencing skills are being used inappropriately, so we don't want to do subtractive empathy. In basic empathy, also called interchangeable empathy, interviewer responses are roughly interchangeable with those of the client. The interviewer is able to say back accurately what the client has said. It is the most common and important counselor comment level. So that idea of, I'm not just listening, but I'm also understanding how you feel. And then finally, based on skill and insightful attending, additive positive empathy focuses on strengths and positives in the client, leading to a can-do rather than a can't-do attitude. But basic empathy always needs to come first. It has been clear for years that the words we say produce expectations that have a major impact on clients' bodies and minds. Your empathetic authenticity and caring as a person are powerful agents of change. It should be patently clear that a positive psychology approach with the expectation of client success will be the most helpful in working with your clients. If you focus on the negative, you will reinforce negative thoughts, feelings, and even neural networks in the brain. Positive expectations produce positive results. And here's a little quote on the right here: the less you respond to negativity, the more peaceful your life becomes. So again, it's a very important element of counseling is to look for that strength-based issues that can help the client manage their lives in a more productive and positive way. Well-established data from neuroscience has confirmed the importance of empathy and located related structures in specific areas of the brain. Key to this process are the mirror neurons, which fire both when a human or animal acts and when it observes actions by another. One of the earliest studies measuring the importance of mirror neurons and empathy asked closely attached partners to watch each other through a one-way mirror receive a mild shock. It was found that the emotional areas of both the shocked partner and the observing partner fired simultaneously, although the pain areas were activated only in the shocked partner. The basic finding has been consistently replicated. We have been able to measure the similarity in brain activity in interviewing. The more similarity, the more empathy and the interviewer comprehension of the client's message. As you become a more experienced and empathetic listener, your mirror neurons are likely to fire in a pattern similar to those of your client. When they hurt, you may notice tight or sad feelings in your body. When they smile, you may return the smile automatically. Equally important, if you are a pleasant person and you smile and you care for them, their self-concept may change and their mirror neurons may start following you. If you respect them, they are more likely to respect themselves. So, in a sense, what we're saying here is these mirror neurons allow a person to see themselves through someone else's eyes in a more positive light. Empathetic listening is a vital part of helping your clients feel supported, grow, and change. Empathy and listening are not just abstract concepts. They are clearly measurable and make a difference in other people's lives. Some authorities say that 85% or more of communication is nonverbal. Observing the clients and your own verbal and nonverbal behavior is a critical dimension of effective interviewing. Emotional tone is often conveyed through nonverbals, which may overrule and be more important than what you are saying to the client. Think about how many ways you can say, "I understand," with vocal tones varying from warm and supportive to neutral to sarcastic. Observation skills help you understand how the client is likely to respond. If a client breaks eye contact, something is happening, but the reasons for looking away will vary. It may be that the topic is uncomfortable, or a recollection from the past that is distracting, or it may be a reaction to you or something you said. Do not overanalyze. However, the client may have heard a noise outside the window, and of course be careful to watch for individual and cultural differences. Watch for small behaviors. A casual nose wipe can indicate a client who is unsure and feels uncomfortable, or perhaps one who is not giving you a fully honest story. And if you think about the story of Pinocchio, and every time he lied his nose grew, well, there is some correlation between lying and playing with your nose while you're talking. So just kind of think of that Pinocchio moment as you meet with clients. You may observe clients crossing their arms or legs when they want to close off a topic, using rapid alterations of eye contact during periods of confusion, or exhibiting increased stammering or speech hesitations when topics are difficult. Jiggling legs, making complete body shifts, or suddenly closing one's arms most often indicate discomfort. Often, people who are communicating will mirror each other's body language, and this is called movement synchrony. Movement complementarity is paired movements that may not be identical but are still harmonious. For instance, one person talks and the other nods in agreement. You may also observe discrepancies in nonverbal behavior. Movement desynchrony occurs when a client is talking casually about a friend, for example, with one hand tightly clenched in a fist and the other relaxed and open, possibly indicating mixed feelings towards that friend. Some expert counselors and therapists deliberately mirror their clients. Experience shows that matching body language, breathing rates, and key words of the client can heighten interviewer understanding of how the client perceives and experiences the world. Skilled counselors and interviewers use attending skills to open and close client talk, making the most effective use of limited time in the interview. If the client has told you the same story 3 times, at a minimum, your repetition makes it 4. Clients need to tell their stories, and if the story is traumatic, extensive storytelling and repetition may be necessary. Be patient and continue to listen carefully in these cases. One of the reasons that we want a client to repeat the traumatic events over and over verbally is it takes the power away from the event, because you are just summarizing it after a while. It no longer carries the same emotional weight after you've said it multiple times. With children, the stories also can go on and on and on, but the same principles apply. Attending to their stories and repeating back to them key elements will enable them to feel heard and be able to move on. Assuming that the client has not been traumatized, after you summarize what you've heard, you can ask a question referring to another topic, usually one mentioned earlier in the interview. Sometimes the most useful thing you can do is support your client silently. Your client may be in tears and you may want to give support through your words. However, sometimes the best support may be simply being with the person non-verbally and not saying anything. Finally, remember the obvious. Clients can't talk while you do. Review your interviews for talk time. Who talks more, you or the client? With most adult clients, the percentage of client talk time should be much more than that of the interviewer. Learning about multicultural differences requires respect for the individual and also for the critical importance of all aspects of the respectful framework. As you engage in observation, recall that each culture has a different style of nonverbal communication. For example, Russians often say yes by shaking their head from side to side and no by moving their head up and down, which of course is opposite in the United States. Another example from the early 90s, which was all over the news and it was hilarious, is in Great Britain making a V with one's fingers with the back of the hand facing the person is a great insult, and it basically means up yours. Well, of course, when George H. Bush, the first Bush president, was in England, he used that gesture, and people lost their minds over it. But it was fairly silly and it blew over pretty quickly. We also have to examine that both verbal and nonverbal communication appears to be changing due to the culture of cell phones and other electronic media. Touching may not be as common in any culture as it used to be. People who talk on cell phones are less likely to communicate in public. Cell phones do have the potential to make us focused on what's going on in our personal lives and the personal lives of the people that we are close to. There are also indications that smiling at others and other positive nonverbal indicators may be decreasing because we spend our time with a 4 or 5 inch screen in front of our face for the vast majority of our day. So we have to be very cognizant that technology affects how body language is utilized. There are many differences in nonverbal cultural behaviors. To name just two, smiling is a sign of warmth in most cultures, but in some situations, especially in Japan, smiling may indicate discomfort. Eye contact may be inappropriate for traditional Navajo, but highly appropriate and expected for a Navajo official who interacts frequently with European Americans. Be careful not to assign your own ideas about what is standard and appropriate nonverbal communication. And so I have an example down here. On the left, good eye contact is expected in the West, meaning the United States, Canada, Western Europe. Strong eye contact is most notable in Spain, Greece, and Arab countries. However, Finns and Japanese are embarrassed by their stare and seek eye contact only at the beginning of a conversation. So the idea of gazing into one another's eyes may be seen as disrespectful in an Asian culture like Japan or a Northern European country like Finland. Finally, you are in this course because you care for others. But we as counselors can only develop our skills fully with extensive intentional directed practice, coupled with evaluation by clients, self-examination, and continuous feedback from supervisors and colleagues. Learning the skills is the first step, but allow yourself time to integrate these ideas into your own natural, authentic being. It does not take magic to make a professional, but it does require systematic and intentional practice to achieve full competence in interviewing, counseling, and psychotherapy. The old saying, how do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice, practice, practice. Anyway, that's it for today. If you have any questions, please contact your instructor for your class. If you are not attending our college but still have questions, please leave a comment and we will return and with a response as quickly as we can. Thank you and have a fabulous day.